Welcome to the Dean's Roundtable podcast series with Bridget Johnson. Each month, we bring you game-changing conversations about K-12 education and leadership. Join us as top educators, field experts, and administrators share actionable strategies to transform your school community. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Dean's Roundtable podcast. I'm Bridget Johnson, the founder of the Dean's Roundtable, a space created for student life professionals to connect, learn, share, and grow together. We are thrilled to welcome two exceptional leaders in the field of educational well-being, Nina Kumar and Nicole Hager from Authentic Connections. Nina Kumar is a co-founder and CEO of Authentic Connections, bringing her background in computer science and psychology from Williams College to maximize well-being in schools through holistic approaches and scientific surveys. Previously at IBM Watson Health, Nina applies her multi-domain expertise to help school leaders understand how climate affects community mental health. Joining Nina is Nicole Hager, Director of School Partnerships, who brings nearly 30 years of independent school administration experience focused on student well-being, particularly supporting students of color and LGBTQ plus students. A Dartmouth graduate with additional master's degrees, Nicole's research has examined supporting transgender and non-binary students in boarding schools. Today, we'll explore Authentic Connections and how they are helping schools address education's most pressing issues and challenges. Nicole and Nina, welcome to the Dean's Roundtable podcast. It's so great to have you guys here today.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. How are you doing? What's happening?
We're good.
Doing well.
Spring is sprung.
Spring has sprung. I love that. And so really just wanted to start with the question, how did Authentic Connections come to be? How did it all get started?
So I can start. So our all the work that we do at AC is based on the research of Dr. Sonia Luther, who was my mom. She was an expert in adolescent mental health and resilience and started doing research in the late 80s, early 90s around students in poverty and was looking for a control group and actually found, as she was studying inner city youth, she found that students at the high achieving school that she had used as a control group were actually struggling with things like mental health difficulties at rates higher than the inner city youth. And that had spurred a long line of research and where she was then helping a few schools a year collect some data about what was going on within the school and giving it back to them to help them guide decision making. And we put an organization around it to be able to reach many more schools across the country and the world.
Awesome. And so, Nicole, how did you hear about Authentic Connections? I know you spent a lot of time in boarding schools previously as a dean of students. So I had to shout that out. But how did you hear about Authentic Connections and get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely in my role as dean of students. I had that role for about 17 years and always really focused on student well-being and always challenged by, sadly, by a lot of my colleagues around, well, how do you know? Why should we invest these resources in the ways that you suggest we should? Where's your data? And lots of data on the academic side and not a lot on the student life side, and so it was frustrating. And then through a colleague of mine, saw Dr. Luther at a conference and came back saying we have got to use Dr. Luther and bring her to campus and see what she's all about. And so this feels like a long, long time ago. It was a long, long time ago. And so we right away engaged. This was kind of pre-Authentic Connections, really, in its sort of current form. And so we brought Dr. Luther in several times in person to survey our students for well-being. And then lo and behold, we had data. And so
Nice.
That could really back up sort of what we were doing and why. So that was the beginning. And so then many years later, and then I moved to schools and I insisted that if you hire me, you have to bring AC, and they did. And so at two different schools, I worked with AC for a long time as a school administrator.
Awesome. So AC focuses on a holistic approach to improving well-being in schools. Can you elaborate on what that means in practice and how it differs from like the traditional approach to student wellness?
I think what we know in schools is, schools for a long time have had a great method for tracking academic achievement and tracking how students are doing in terms of their learning, but there isn't really an established way for tracking their wellness overall. And so as we think about how to support students, the idea with our surveys is that we're looking at all different aspects of the student experience and not just their academic achievements. And I think that that's something that we really try to bring via our work to as many schools as we can. Nicole, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I would add the focus on relationships.
Mm,
And so just a deep understanding of Dr. Luther's work around resilience, which is, grounded in relationships. And, of course, I've mostly worked in boarding schools, but in independent schools generally, certainly true of public schools as well, that those relationships really matter. And so obviously we're surveying students, but we also survey faculty well-being. We also survey parents. So when I think of our holistic approach, it certainly is beyond the academic, but also really asking students in particular about
hmm
their relationships with their peers, their relationships with their parents, their relationships at school, sort of with and among the school climate, but with their teachers, and just really understanding how all those relationships impact student well-being.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, how do your surveys identify issues that might otherwise go unnoticed by school administrators and teachers?
Mhm.
I think the first thing is, by asking the entire school community, I think we get a sense of, what really is going on. It's really easy within any community to hear the loudest voices, and
Sure.
sometimes that means that you lose what's going on with those students or faculty and staff, parents, whoever may not be, speaking the loudest about what's going on with them. And so I think that by getting a whole view, within any given school, we're able to see things that one just can't, because you can't see everything that's going on
Right.
within a school.
Yeah, and I would just add that sort of similarly, and this was my experience as a dean, especially as a dean of students. And I know deans who are listening or watching or will understand what I'm saying, that you spend 99% of your time with about 2% of the population.
Yes.
And then it starts to skew your sense of things, because you're thinking, oh my goodness, nobody's going to class and everybody's using drugs, and so it's just and everybody's sad and depressed. Like you have this sense, and then there's the thrivers. There's kids sort of on the other end, and as deans, you're also working with those kids, student leaders, etc. But there's this vast middle, and so your lived experience is a huge data point. Of course, that
Sure.
anecdotal, that day to day, and certainly over time is going to inform maybe your interventions or intervention
hmm
and just responses to what you're seeing. Having the data, as Nina just said, sort of fills that in. You get your finger on the pulse of the entire student community, and you get a sense that it's going to, like, oftentimes it confirms what it is you already know, but you have data and you can see the whole student body. So I don't know that it always revealed to me something I didn't already know or notice, but
Sure.
the other thing that we do is provide schools. We do this analysis to identify the areas of school life most impacting mental health. So if there were surprises, it kind of came there. It was like, oh,
Mm.
I would not have guessed maybe that is an area that is most linked to mental health in our community. And so those would be, I suppose, surprises or things that we might not have noticed.
Have noticed.
Yeah.
And so, speaking of kind of things that you noticed or things that are kind of, oh, yeah, I understand. What are some of the wellness challenges you're seeing kind of across different types of schools, and how are you helping schools address those concerns?
Mhm. I think right now the biggest thing that we've been, I mean, you see it in the national landscape and in the news every day, but being able to have constructive, productive conversations about what students are experiencing, and the
Mm,
language that one can use right now to have these types of discussions is definitely something that we're starting to see as a challenge within schools, and I think
mm.
we're going to continue to see.
Yeah, and so I wondered just how, when those things come up, can you talk about the process that you use to work with schools, just in terms of, all right, you've given them the survey, you've got the results back. What happens next?
So after we actually get the survey results, we analyze it, as Nicole said, to get down to what really is most linked within mental health, to mental health
Mhm.
within a school, as well as what's really coming up on their free response data. We'll ask what's going well at school, what are your biggest worries? What are some areas for improvement? And read those responses line by line to get a sense of what's really top of mind within any given school.
Okay.
And we'll analyze the data, bring that all together, and then set up a phone call to walk the stakeholder group through the findings. And so we'll take them through our interactive dashboards. We'll show them what's standing out. We'll let them see, how does anxiety vary by grade, by gender, by ethnicity. We'll show them where they are relative to other schools. And then Nicole has done a really great job of collating recommendations and best practices across schools. And so we'll ensure that we're not just saying this is what's happening, but instead also adding to that and saying, and this is what we think you should do next. And whenever we're working with a school, we know that it takes time and resources to do anything like this. And so we try to give recommendations that a school could act on immediately, not something that we don't say you need to overhaul your wellness program.
Student life program.
we absolutely do not want to do that.
Yeah, and I imagine, because that can be overwhelming to receive these results and feel like, oh my gosh, we've got so much to do, and especially these days when resources can be limited. How do you help schools identify and prioritize like what they should do first, like the low-hanging fruit, I would call?
Yeah, I'll just jump in there. As I said, as I often say when in the readouts, what I feel and I felt this as someone on the school side of the desk, kind of the bread and butter here at Authentic Connections, is to do just that, is to focus in on the areas that matter most. So we ask about a lot of things. Every single measure that we're asking about is linked to mental health in schools. So we know that we're doing the analysis to identify for schools those areas that are most linked. And then, of course, Anita just mentioned that schools get an interactive dashboard in the end that they can then take a look at their data across various different demographics. So then you can kind of drill down, where you might get some data back that says, oh, it looks like we're doing much better and it's great. But then you drill down and you see that there's a demographic group that hasn't improved quite as much, or has maybe gotten worse. And so that focuses your energies. That's one of the things that I found most helpful, is when over time I had done the survey over time, is to see, okay, we're getting better. The aggregate's looking pretty darn good.
Yeah.
But as I continue to drill down, our kids of color were not doing so great. And our LGBTQ kids were not doing so great. And so we could kind of, whatever the recommendations were from AC, we could kind of hone in and focus in and say, okay, well, if we're looking at low access to mental health support, certainly whatever we do to increase that, to increase that access for typically marginalized members of our community, certainly everybody's going to benefit. So it's that kind of focus that is, really born out of our analyses, and then reflected in those recommendations. I will say to schools now that I'm on this side of the desk, that I don't think I even appreciated just how much the analysis really gave me, and to really, I say to schools, trust our analysis. We have done that work, and we're giving you these focus areas. If you do just that and nothing else, you're gonna see some gains, and not to get too lost in all the details that exist within the data set, for sure.
I mean, the data proves it, right? I mean, you guys have spent a lot of time on a lot of different school campuses and have the data to show that, you kind of know what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
One of the things
I'll say, it's making a difference too. Sorry, Bridget.
No, absolutely.
That aggregate data, and we're seeing the rates of anxiety
Results
come down among the schools that work with us, and that's just so exciting. After a huge rise after COVID, we have a 2 year sort of decline in mental health symptoms. So I'm really excited about that, and because otherwise,
then why are we even doing
it here?
So, we're talking about trends in mental health, and, how things have shifted since COVID. Kind of what are you seeing in terms of trends over the past few years, and what kind of effective strategies have emerged for schools?
I think sure, I can just start by saying, I think we added a question around the start of the pandemic asking about how students feel like others in school are being treated differently, or faculty and staff, how they feel like other people are being treated differently consistently for a while. Political views has been the identifier that folks feel like others are being treated differently most frequently
Yep.
about. So that's something that we're definitely keeping a close eye on, continuing to keep a close eye on since the pandemic. We saw things like learning efficacy, students feeling like they're able to learn. That was not doing so well across schools when we started at the beginning of the pandemic asking this question. Since then, students are saying that they feel like they're able to learn much better, but we're still seeing that as something that's been really closely tied to students' mental health. And so that's another thing that we've been closely monitoring.
And is there anything surprising or unexpected that has emerged recently from your research that has changed how you approach your recommendations in terms of school well-being in communities?
Do you want to answer that, Nicole?
Yeah, I was in thinking about this. I don't feel like there's anything, again, terribly surprising that has
Mhm.
emerged, that has necessarily changed our approach. Like, honestly, the biggest shift was having the data to
Mm.
support kind of my lived experience. So, like that, so that changed my approach to
Uh-huh.
well-being in my schools.
Okay.
Before it was, "Ugh, this thing is happening, and it seems to be happening with more students, even if it was still just a handful, but it was time consuming and intensive, and there's a lot involved there. So then you might institute a program to address an issue that has come up. We know
Uh-huh.
you're just talking about fires in schools as a dean's group in particular, but the approach then shifted when I had some data that told me how my whole community was doing. So
Mm.
so that was, when I think about any kind of surprises or unexpected, not unexpected. I guess I expected to have this experience once I got the data. I think
Mhm.
I didn't expect just how valuable it was going to be to make substantive change for the whole
Mhm.
school community, as opposed to just continuing to kind of put out little fires everywhere and always feel like you're behind. This was a way to really get a sense. And then over time, certainly having that data, I don't think I could have anticipated how valuable that was, to
Yeah.
see the data over time. So that's the
And
biggest for me.
and so can you talk a little bit about you talk data over time. So schools, are they surveying multiple times a year, or once a year, annually? Talk about the cadence in which they are getting this data and getting this feedback.
Mhm.
Most schools that we work with survey on an annual basis.
Okay.
We have a couple of schools that will survey in the fall and then also in the spring, and
Mhm.
they get a chance to make adjustments throughout the year.
Mm.
But most schools that we work with survey, I'd say, once a year,
Okay.
generally around the same time of year, so that we can try to take time out of the equation as much as we can. Every
Sure.
school has its own cadence throughout the year in terms of the stressful times or the more relaxed times. So schools, we generally recommend that they stay at about the same time. But I know Nicole always surveyed at in January and February.
Like,
And
woo,
I
yeah,
am thinking, yeah,
that's an interesting time on school campuses for sure.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So, talk about the different types of schools you work with, and do you tailor your approach, or do you have different surveys for different school types?
Mhm.
so for the most part, we've had a lot of great partnerships with independent school associations, and so the majority of the schools that we work with are independent schools. We have a mix of
Uh-huh.
boarding and day schools. We do work
Okay.
with public schools, charter schools as well. Um, we do, with the surveys we administer, offer the ability for schools to add a couple of questions, and that allows us to make sure that we're getting all of the information that they need, and we're able to tailor things to the information that they're most interested in collecting.
Mhm.
We also, with the dashboards that we give back, we offer the ability for schools to compare their results with similar schools, so that public schools compare to public schools, private schools compare to
Right.
private schools. If boarding schools want it and compare to boarding schools, they're able to do that, or single gender schools, whatever it may be.
Mhm.
So that allows us to get them back a little bit more targeted results and findings to make decisions from.
Yeah.
Awesome. And Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Nicole.
I was just gonna, I'd only add that, right out of the gate, it's already tailored.
Okay.
This is sort of the beauty of it. Actually, when I first started working with Dr. Luther, the norms that we got were kind of national norms. I think maybe from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. Nita can speak to that, what those norms were, but we
Yep.
were off the charts, So, this is kind of what was talking about sort of on the front end about how all this got started, and Dr. Luther's research, kind of stumbling upon to some degree these high achieving schools, this idea that in high achieving schools students are really struggling, and so already it's a kind of tailored group, which I think is really important for people to understand, so that when you're doing your norms right out of the gate, even when before you start to be more specific in your norming, whether it's by a geographic location or those other areas Nina mentioned, you are looking at your data against other schools that are also in that high achieving space. That is
Mm,
private and public, but it's mostly independent schools.
gotcha. And is there a particular metric that you found most valuable in measuring success of well-being at schools, just in general?
Mhm.
Is there that one question you're like, oh, you look at this and like, we this is how
Yes.
the school's doing. You
Nina knows
give a,
exactly what I'm going to say.
uh
Yeah. Go ahead, Nicole.
Do you? Okay.
oh.
Well, I would a couple of things we've already touched on. The
hmm
demographic data is just invaluable. Just
Okay.
to be able to look at your data by demographic group. In my view, that's just so important. And to see, is this a class level issue? This
Yeah.
class of
Sure.
2028 that is struggling throughout, or is this a grade 10 issue?
Yep.
So being able to sort of parse things out is just in that kind of detail to really hone in. Um,
hmm
that using both quantitative and qualitative data, like that, just so incredibly valuable, and to get those focus areas and the data over time. So we've talked about all of those things, but if there's a single question that kept me up at night, the data, it's
Uh-huh.
not the question itself, but the data around it, is what we call confiding in adults. And
Mm,
so just having worked in the high school population for my entire career, just kind of understanding teenagers that, they're naturally turning away from their parents, and that's developmentally
sure.
appropriate and differentiated and
Right.
all of that stuff. That is really important that schools show up and be that adult, have at least one adult. And Dr. Luther wrote extensively on this too, having a go-to person. They're so
hmm
important, the difference that can make for kids.
Yeah.
So we asked that question: if you were troubled with a family or personal problem, which adult, not one adult, which adult or adults at school would you turn to?
Uh-huh.
And so schools can customize that to make sure it reflects their school, and it's just
Sure.
roles. It's not necessarily people, but it's roles. And then they can also answer nobody. And so
Oof.
that's the data point that I would watch.
Ouch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would like kind of maybe not even listen to the rest of the research. But it's like, wait, let me see, like, confiding in adults and just wanting that nobody number to come down. Was that what you thought I'd say, Nina?
That's what I thought you'd say. My answer is we have a metric called the Well-Being Index, which we developed as a composite essentially of symptoms of mental health as well as
hmm
feelings about isolation at school. So it's anxiety, depression, rule-breaking behaviors, substance use, and isolation at school, feelings about school generally. And we compute one number off it so that you can track with one
Yeah.
number what's really going on in terms of mental health. And the reason for that is within any stressful environment, we want to think about wellness. The science tells us to think about wellness in terms of an absence of mental health symptoms. And so that's why I look at the mental health and the well-being index as that number that I like to use to track
Mm.
Sure.
how schools are doing.
You all mentioned, relationships. You touched on that briefly early on, and that data point goes back to relationships. If a student feels connected to someone, and when that score is low, I don't know what the scale looks like, but when that score is low, how do you break break that to schools? First of all, but secondly, what do you tell them about, like, it really is that relationships, a lot of that doesn't really cost anything, but it does take time. And all these schools feel like, we're so busy, we don't have time to do this. And if you don't take the time, if you don't make the time to kind of build that foundation for students, then what are we really doing, right? So how do you kind of, one, let let people know that, sorry, you're not doing so well in this area. And two, tell them like if you actually just spend the time kind of on the relationship track, you'll see some pretty remarkable fruit. And it doesn't take that long, actually.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just about everything in our survey is comes back to relationships. So when we're asking kids about their perceptions or experience of their relationships with their parents, so
Mm,
we're asking about that. And then, of course, with their peers and victimization and bullying and closeness with peers and any number of measures there is relational. So we're giving back so much data. And then, of course, faculty emotional support, faculty academic support, teacher alienation. These are all things that we are asking about on the survey that can sort of flesh out for a school on the quantitative side. And then, of course, it's inevitably going to come up on the qualitative side.
sure.
Wide open questions. We ask what's going well, what can be improved. And so, whatever's top of mind for kids, they're going to write about. And faculty emotional support is almost always kind of in that top three space on the qualitative side. And so there's a lot that schools can kind of fill in that confiding in adults number. So yes,
Yeah.
it's hard to give that data back sometimes when they're showing just much above the norms and kind of a high percentage of kids who've chosen that nobody. You can also drill down and filter that to see is there a specific demographic group or groups
Mm,
that are having
sure.
higher rates there, and maybe you have to drill down some of your outreach and energies towards specific demographic groups. So then our recommendations with all of that in mind, I might see that data point, but I'm
Yeah.
also looking at these other data points to say, like,
Sure.
what can I understand about what might be contributing to that
Hmm.
disconnect for that high, whatever percentages of kids saying nobody.
Uh-huh.
We do also ask a subsequent question there. So any student who chooses nobody, they get a second question about why.
Okay.
So that again kind of helps schools understand there are kids that, I think in the greatest number select, I just don't, I'm not going to bring my personal problems to school. I'm not, so I'm never going to open up at school. So I was always like, okay, so probably
Oh,
there might be always a percentage of these teenagers we're not going to reach.
yeah.
We know
That's
that
fair.
about teenagers, but I think many of them, if given the right environment. So we have a lot of recommendations that speak to that. Really
Okay.
sit down, and I know a lot of schools are doing this, do that mapping exercise and ask teachers, who do you feel connected to? See who they say. Ask the kids, who do you feel connected to? And then you kind of weave that web. Um, just having a support team that
Yeah.
is speaking weekly about kids that you feel are a little bit on the margins and not connecting, and how can we identify an adult in that child's life that might spend a little bit more time. And then sometimes what I'm reading in some of the free response and reading from the data, I can just see that maybe they just need some more professional development around the social emotional lives of kids. Like,
Mm.
you know,
Okay.
even though we kind of take that for granted that anybody wanting to work in an independent school comes with that capacity.
Kind of.
Maybe not a safe assumption.
Maybe not.
Yeah, yeah. So the recommendations really run the gamut there, from sort of broader PD to specific drill down and talk about every kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
I think also just to build on that a little bit, like in some schools, we find that it may just be a lack of understanding from students around what will and won't be kept confidential, and they feel
mm,
like they can't go to adults at school because they feel like it's whatever they say is going to be make it back to parents or make it to other teachers that they have relationships with. And so in some schools, and I feel like it's helpful when we get something like that from the free response, but there are some
mhm.
times where it's really, we just need some better communication with students
Yeah, for sure.
about how they can be confiding in adults at school, and how adults can support them.
For sure.
Sure. I like that mapping exercise that you talked about, especially not just with students, but with the adults on campus as well, because everybody needs connection. And so if the adults aren't feeling connected, then they're not modeling what connection looks like. And so how do you expect your student body to feel connected or think that they can be connected if they're not seeing it readily available amongst the adults? And so I think starting there first
Mhm.
is important, but I wonder oftentimes is it, people go straight to the kids and like, let's, we got to fix the kids. And we haven't really talked about what's happening on the adult side. Do you see that happening?
Oh, yeah. For sure, and that's it's just so great that you brought that up because even on the student survey, we have a measure that asks students to kind of assess what they are seeing around
Hmm.
their adult relationships between school and parents, between adults at school, and the level of respect and regard there, things like that. So that is there, but also we do have a faculty and staff resilience survey because this was another piece that Dr. Luther wrote and talked extensively about is this idea of caring for the caregivers.
Yeah.
And just this idea that, you can spend all this energy really digging in on the data around students and caring for their well-being. But if you don't also care for the caregivers, and in this case, it is, the adults that are spending all day with these kids and sometimes all night in boarding schools
Yeah.
as well, then, you're only kind of going to go so far, really. So yeah, so we do talk a lot about that, and there are schools that will do both,
Uh-huh.
surveys and sort of do that kind of wraparound, but we talk about that a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that when we're able to see different perspectives on a campus, and you can see how students feel like faculty and staff are um, relating to each other or relating to the students against how faculty and staff feel like they're dealing with these relationships on campus, it can be
Hmm.
really, really telling and helpful for schools.
I bet. Absolutely. And so, we've talked about faculty and staff, we talked about students, we barely mentioned parents. So I'm going to kind of jump into that pool a little bit because I wonder how often schools are asking you to survey the parent body and kind of what you're seeing there.
Mhm.
Yeah, when we survey parents, I think it provides another very interesting perspective on some of these different topics. We know that with parents, we can never get as representative as a sample as we can
Sure.
with students and we can with faculty and staff. So we know sometimes we're getting the folks who are most happy, the folks who are least happy. So we always want to keep that in mind as we're looking at parent results. But I think that the the having the ability to see how parents perceive their child as being supported or perceive that their child knows how to get help or doesn't know how to get help or where to get
Mm,
help, that is always really, really helpful for schools to see because sometimes again, it may just be a communication issue with parents or with students, but I think that information can be super helpful in terms of identifying where parents see gaps in any kind of school experience.
Mhm. Yeah. I would just add that, on I mentioned before on the student surveys, we ask about their experience and perception of their relationship with their parents. And then, of course, we have recommendations that are attached to that are going to
yeah.
school around parent programming. And, so this is what kids are saying. This is where they're struggling most. And here's a recommendation for you around parent programming. And often, when I'm doing the readout, I'll show the school sort of a grade level breakdown for that. Just again, and that
Okay.
to focus your energies. If we're always seeing that there's a big jump from, say, eighth to ninth grade in
Mm.
hovering behaviors of parents and how that's impacting kids, then maybe that's where you do a little bit more intervention in that transition between age
Sure.
one, things like that. And then on the parent side, absolutely. What I find really kind of fun and interesting is when schools are doing our student survey, our faculty and staff survey, and then the parent survey is to sort of see, some things that are coming up on the parent end where they're expressing kind of greater concern. And then you look at the student data and they're like, there's no concern at all,
Yeah.
and or where there are disconnects or where there are
Right.
obviously some there's some alignment there,
Hmm.
but so it can be so helpful just to say, okay, well, kids don't seem to share the opinion of their parents that they don't have access to mental health support. Maybe you need to improve some communications to your parents
To the
about
parents.
the kinds of things
Right.
that students have access to. That it's a communication issue, so that's been helpful.
Yeah, and I think, the communication in general for everyone, like threading that needle is pretty important just in terms of making sure that all the constituencies are connected and getting the same information, and you being consistent in how and when you're disseminating that information. I think sometimes that's all you need. It's not like the school's not doing the thing. They are actually doing the thing. They just no one really knows
Yeah.
because you haven't been effective in how you're communicating. So I think that's important to kind of highlight. So as we kind of think about closing, I wanted to just ask, is there anything that you're starting to see bubble up that hasn't been something that was an issue before that you're just kind of keeping your eye on at this point?
I would say I would say that the biggest thing is, Nicole mentioned earlier the importance of relationships and the idea here that resilience rests on relationships. The
Mm-hmm.
other main piece that I would want to make sure we get across is this idea that bad is stronger than good. And what I
Mm,
mean by that is that when somebody says or does something mean to you, it hurts your mental health more than when somebody says something nice to you, helps your
yeah.
mental health. And we've kind of seen this idea of divisiveness and this aspects of negative aspects of relationships in schools boiling up and down, and so on since the pandemic. And that's something that we're keeping a very, very close eye on, because if we know we really do need to think about prioritizing reducing the negative aspects of relationships if we want to make an impact on mental health overall.
I appreciate you saying that. And I've always, I'm supposed to say always, but more recently, the idea of being kind, I feel like is getting a little bit lost here on a regular basis. You've got um, kindness in how we communicate, especially with, social media and how everyone's kind of on their keyboard, just spitting out like their opinions on things, whether or not, it's positive or negative, whether or not you have the full picture. And how can we have really the full picture when you're, reading a sentence or seeing a picture on social media? But people have opinions, and people now feel like their opinions can be mean spirited. They can tear people down. And we aren't modeling right now what it means to be kind. And so if
Mhm.
we are raising students that aren't kind, they're going to be adults that aren't kind. And like, where does that leave us, And so
Yes.
really kind of thinking about that in schools and how we can start to kind of counteract what we feel like now is the norm. I feel like is something that I am hoping that schools are taking a look at.
Yeah,
Just my
absolutely. And
opinion.
yeah, and I don't know that this is considered new anymore because we've been kind of at this for the last, I'll call it 8, 10 years,
Mm,
and just around civil discourse. And a lot
yeah,
of schools have been engaged in that conversation about, how can we develop programs around civil discourse, or, however you want to call it. But absolutely, just this idea that, yes, great schools are made of all kinds of opinions and points of views, and we need to make space for that, but not for personal attacks. Like that's, I find myself kind of offering that recommendation as much as I possibly can,
yeah,
so long as it's really, connected to their data. And for a
mhm,
lot of schools, it is, because we are seeing victimization. We're looking at that, watching that data over time. We are looking at political views, as Nina had said, just
mhm,
our equity and inclusion measure. And so navigating that space, in that just continues to just be increasingly intense and increasingly divisive.
yeah,
So like it doesn't feel new, but it feels like it's reached a whole new level, I guess. And that I feel schools need to kind of double down on their efforts to be clear about sort of where that line is, where, we are engaging in discourse and it's okay to disagree. And you might even get kind of passionate,
absolutely. Yeah,
but the minute it crosses this line around attacking people's kind of core identities and et cetera, then that's a no-go at the school. So I think doubling down on our missions and doubling down on that messaging is really important. The technology piece also is not new, but it's just, continues to evolve in ways. I remember when I was first hired at the school where I was dean of students for 17 years, I was interviewed for the magazine, and they said,
mhm.
"What do you think is the most pressing issue facing kids these days?" And I said technology. So that was uh, 25 years ago.
A little while ago.
It was a long time ago, but it was really kind of like, oh gosh, Instant Messenger was on the scene.
Oh my gosh.
Remember sort of what was coming up, but it was all really new, and I just remember thinking, I get it's a great tool, it's a great academic tool. We need to leverage it to And also, as a dean of students, I was like, it's just going to make lying, cheating, stealing easier, access to
So
drugs,
much
sex,
easier. Oh,
all the things. And so now we're just fast forward, like, yeah, still true. And as it evolves, schools have to be thinking about how to keep up with that. And social media just wasn't even on the scene back then when I was even
yeah,
thinking about it. And now exacerbating all of the complexity of adolescence in ways that are really harmful to kids. So I think
absolutely.
it's not an emerging challenge. It's just kind of an ongoing,
And ongoing, ever present,
uh,
looming,
for sure.
all the words.
Kind of don't know what's around the corner. That's
Exactly. You're like,
yeah.
oh, shoot, didn't see that.
Didn't see that.
Um, so for schools who haven't done this surveying, haven't kind of looked at their kind of student well-being in aggregate, how can they get in touch with Authentic Connections? What would you say would be the first step?
Mhm.
Well, I think we'll share our link with you, Bridget, and make
Mhm.
sure that folks have access to that. But if folks reach out to us, we're happy to try to talk to them about how we work with schools a little bit more and how we might be able to support them. I know that a lot of schools these days are working on they have a directive around well-being within strategic plans, and so we try to help support that as much as we can and make sure they have the information they need to make decisions and design a strategic plan that works for their school.
Wonderful. I didn't know, Nicole, were you going to jump in and say something else?
No, I
Okay.
just to endorse, be in touch. I just again being now on both sides of the desk, I just
Mhm.
cannot. Obviously, I work for AC now, but I just as a user of AC for so many years, at a couple of different very different kinds of schools, just so how important it is to keep your finger on the pulse of student well-being and to track that over time, and it's possible now. In the
Yeah.
ways that it's always been there on the academic side. And so we do just that. That first step is kind of this intake call, just to say, what do you need? What are your needs and wants, and we'll figure
Mhm.
out, whether and how we can support that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so as we close today, what takeaways or what tools or what couple of things would you want schools to keep in mind as they are thinking about mental health and student well-being on their campuses?
Mhm.
I think the first thing I'd say is just the importance of getting anonymous feedback. I think especially
Mm,
as these conversations about identity continue to, be happening on the national level, it's going to folks may feel even more afraid to be talking about their experiences
sure.
with well-being, openly and honestly. So as much as possible, creating avenues for folks to provide anonymous feedback, I think will be super helpful.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've already, said some version of what you're asking there, Bridget, but
Mhm.
for students and for faculty. So to kind of underscore, you kind of went there naturally, Bridget, just when we're talking about students, but
Yeah.
what about the adults where burnout continues to be really high and across schools, public, private, lots of national conversation around that. But in this time of such uncertainty, to be sure that you're caring for the well-being of your community, be sure that you are engaging in anonymous. I would totally agree, and just keep at it.
Yeah.
So even
Keep
when
at
it's
it.
even when it's improving, there's some schools that we work with over time, and I'm sitting in these readouts. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is you're doing so great, and they often will say, yeah, and there's still work to be done. I was like,
Still room for improvement. Yeah.
yeah, well, and this is the kind of thing that if you take your foot off the pedal,
Right.
the
It's a very
environment
good point.
can quickly reverse course, and so it's one of those steady constant pressure is gonna help
Yeah, like they say, it's easier to get out of shape than it is to get into shape, right?
Mhm.
So,
Oh yeah.
so I tell myself every day when I don't want to go to the gym. So
That is very true.
you want to keep those preventative measures going. And so I think Authentic Connections is one of those preventative measures, keeping a pulse on what's happening with the schools. And so definitely an organization that I was excited to, come across as, doing work with deans and helping schools give them resources of how they can have everyone on their campuses living their best lives. So I really appreciate you guys being here today. Thanks so much for taking the time to spend some time with the Dean's Roundtable,
Yeah.
and look forward to our continued partnership in the future.
Thank you, Bridget.
So,
Thank you, Bridget.
absolutely. Yeah. So great to see you guys. And so, if you like what you heard today and are interested in hearing more from the Dean's Roundtable, we encourage you to like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thank you for spending time with us on the Dean's Roundtable podcast. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Dean's Roundtable podcast. Is your student life program delivering on your mission? Our new K-12 student life assessment moves you beyond anecdotes to evidence-based decisions. Through comprehensive stakeholder surveys and expert analysis, you'll get concrete insights across 8 essential dimensions of student life, from culture and wellness to staff effectiveness and resource allocation. We are seeking founding partner schools to be first to experience this transformative assessment process and help shape the future of student life evaluation. And because this work shouldn't be done in isolation, join our Student Life Professionals community of practice, facilitated monthly with Trey Education. Connect with fellow deans and student life leaders for real-time support, idea exchange, and solutions to your biggest challenges. 8 sessions per year plus ongoing collaboration through our shared messaging group. Whether you need data-driven insights, peer connection, or both, we're here to support your student life leadership. Learn more at deansroundtable.org. Today's episode was hosted by Bridget Johnson in conversation with Nina Kumar and Nicole Hager. Produced and edited by Andrick Sigmund and music by PremiumBeat.com. For any questions, contact information can be found in the episode description. And as always, thanks again for listening.